Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to tonight's virtual program on the Electoral College. The world is a very different place than it was last year at this time, but I still take some comfort in the fact that we can get together to exchange ideas and learn from each other. So, as you know, I'm a college professor, and now all of my classes are now conducted in the same way as today's program. These virtual experiences are different, but I still think they can be meaningful. So with that in mind, I want to offer special thanks to your library staff that remains committed to public programming in this difficult time. This program was originally part of the New Jersey Council for the Humanities Public Scholars Program. Several months ago, the council suspended their public programming, but your library officials picked up the pieces and reached out to me so we could still keep this series alive. So I want to thank Margie Ticknor, Susan Manella, who was the person who originally contacted me, and our moderator this evening, Dan Nazarko. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you specifically to those folks. So just about a quick point about how we will proceed. Dan already alluded to this, but I will just repeat it. I normally take questions throughout the program as if it were a college class, but the virtual world places certain limitations on us. And I will be discussing various slides in the PowerPoint, and you may not be visible to me, and I won't be able to monitor the chat. So for the sake of coherence, I will answer any questions you have at the end of the program. I've also provided library officials with a few resources to share with you. One is an opinion piece I wrote with regards to the Electoral College, and I've also provided them with a few references and links so you can follow up on our discussion after today. And yes, I'll discuss that a little bit further in the program, a little later in the program. So as you can see, the title of the program is Electoral College, Do We Need It? So let me start by telling you that we have breaking news when it comes to the Electoral College. In July, the United States Supreme Court heard a case by several Hillary Clinton electors of Washington State in 2016. These electors were fined about $1,000 for trying to switch their votes. I know at least one of them tried to vote for Colin Powell. The electors at the time, and then later in their court case, argued that according to the Constitution, they could vote from whomever they wanted. So even though Hillary Clinton won Washington State and they were selected to serve on the Clinton slate, they could not be forced to vote for her. This is their argument anyway to the Supreme Court. In a rare show of unanimity, in a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court voted 9-0 that the states could, I think that's the key word here, force their electors to vote for the slate to whom they were pledged. This has been an issue, or had been an issue of debate for hundreds of years, and the Supreme Court went a long way towards resolving that dispute. So as I say, my first slide is Electoral College, do we need it? So it's been quite a campaign season. It's going to get even more interesting tomorrow night. There'll be the first debate between the two main contenders, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So I'm here to tell you that no matter who you support, whether it's Biden or Trump, you will not actually be voting for them directly on November 3rd. In New Jersey, it's not obvious by looking at the ballot, but you are actually voting for a group of electors who will actually cast the deciding votes in the election on the Monday after the second Wednesday in December, which this year happens to be December 14th. This group of electors, which forms the Electoral College, will then cast the real vote and select the next president. So as a boy, I used to think that the candidates that get the most votes win. So when I would sit down with my popcorn and watch election night, or even as a young adult, I didn't realize that the popular vote is really secondary to the outcome. So in fact, in 2 of the last 5 presidential elections, the person with the most votes did not win. So this was the case in 2016. Clinton actually received 3 million more votes than Trump, but she didn't get the votes in the right places. My friend put in that annoying applause thing, so I have no idea how to get rid of it. Technology. But anyway, those are the 2016 contenders, obviously Trump and Hillary Clinton. Now, if you were to look at the Electoral College results for 2016, you would think that Trump won a sizable majority, right? It's pretty clear who won, right? Trump had 306 electoral votes and Clinton 232. So, but as I said, he didn't actually win the popular vote. One of the questions most frequently asked of me is, will that happen again this year? And I say to everybody, it's quite possible. This used to be a rare occasion, but as I say, it's happened twice in the last 5 elections. The only other time it happened was in 1876, when Rutherford B. Hayes was elected without the benefit of the popular vote. So what I always tell my students is, when you're sitting down with your hors d'oeuvres to watch election night, you need to think about the election as a series of 50 separate elections. It's like a big electoral jigsaw puzzle, and you start trying to figure out who is compiling the right number of votes in the right number of places to get to that magic number of 270 electoral votes. I was going to say that for me, the best website, if you're interested in constructing, a possible outcome to the election for this year, is go to 270 to win. It's a wonderful website where you can actually pick which state you think goes to which candidate. Quite a lot of fun. So, as Dan noted, I was an elector in 2012 for Barack Obama. And that was the last time the popular vote and the Electoral College agreed on the winner. So you can see there's the map there. Obama had 332 electoral votes and Romney had 206. But as I say, you may not have realized it, but when you were voting for Obama, if you voted for him, you were actually voting for me. So thank you to my supporters. To those who opposed me, I tried to be your elector too. And I thank you for your participation in the process. Now, I wrote an opinion piece on my experience, which, as I mentioned, I have asked the organizers of the lecture to make available to you. Now, before I go into my personal experience, I want to give you some background on this very unique system of electing a president and vice president. Our founders were very influenced by the Enlightenment and the sense that our leaders should not be hereditary monarchs selected by God to rule over us. But I think it's fair to say that they had very strong opinions about who should be allowed to vote and participate in the political process. They wanted elections, but they wanted the right sort of people to take part in those elections. So at Kean University, I have a fun game that I play with my students. I call it the who can vote game. And so I start at the very beginning of our nation in the late 19th century. So let's play. Everyone raise your virtual hand. Now, as I mentioned the following groups, please proceed to lower your hand if you belong to that group. All right? Women, if you are a woman, lower your hand. You won't be able to vote for another 126 years. We're celebrating now, as a matter of fact, the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. So, African Americans, if you have even a drop of African American blood, please lower that hand. Indigenous folks, known as American Indians, put that hand down. Now, those with your hands up, don't be feeling too good about yourself just yet. Because in the late 18th century, you would need to be a prosperous landowner to vote. A man of considerable wealth. If you are not a very wealthy white guy, then put down your hand. If your hand is still up, then I would like you to consider buying us all dinner after this pandemic is over. There are many fine eateries in Madison. I've partaken of quite a number. So when our Constitution was being drafted in the 1780s, there was a strong sentiment that there should be more participation in the governing of our nation, but it was not felt that everyone should participate in major decisions. So the Electoral College is an institution steeped in the tradition of placing a check on the sentiments of the rabble. It assumes that many folks can be easily persuaded by a demagogue, and that what is truly best for the nation can only be discerned by a select few of the right kind of people. So as you see on this slide, Hamilton is the guy to your left. The other guy plays him occasionally on Broadway. So we can thank Hamilton for the Electoral College. He set forth the basic principles of it in Federalist Paper number 68. We are fairly certain that Hamilton is the author. So as you probably know, the Federalist Papers were written by Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, but they all signed their essays Publius. So we know from the subsequent debate, though, that Hamilton is the primary thinker behind the Electoral College. He was seeking to strike a balance among the competing arguments of the day. Those who wanted less direct voter involvement wanted the president chosen by the state governors. Another proposal was to have the members of the United States Senate pick the president. As you're probably aware, originally senators were chosen by their state legislatures. So that would have been a very circuitous route indeed to selecting our president. The proposal most commonly heard today was also raised at the time. That is, the president should be selected by a popular vote. That was discussed then as well. Now, Hamilton thought a subset of our best citizens should sit on an electoral college. Let me quote him directly, and the quote is up on the screen right now. These are the types of folks he wanted to serve in the Electoral College. Men most capable of analyzing the qualities adapted to the station and acting under circumstances favorable to deliberation and to a judicious combination of all the reasons and inducements which were proper to govern their choice. So in this very deliberative process, he thought it would be difficult for a man with the talents for low intrigue and the little arts of popularity to gain the respect of upstanding citizens from across the nation. So that's who he thought should serve on the Electoral College. I just want to let you know the Electoral College, that is all 538 electors, never meets as a joint body. Each set of electors meets in their state capitals. Two commonly given reasons for this, also in the back of Hamilton's mind, was one, a foreign power would find it more difficult to influence electors at a variety of geographic locations. I hope you're paying attention, Vladimir Putin. An unscrupulous pretender to the presidency, this is number two, would find it difficult to rally support at these different locations. Right? So these are all the ideas going through Hamilton's mind. The gathering together of electors gives them a chance to ponder the issues before they vote. This deliberative process was another key element for Hamilton and the founders. So when Hamilton talks about the most capable of men, this is who he's talking about. That would be me. All right, just kidding. Now, the debate continues today about the best method to select a president: Electoral College versus popular vote. Now, I've taken part in debates about this subject on a number of occasions. The best argument I have heard in favor of it, the Electoral College, is that smaller states maintain a stronger voice. A strict numerical count would favor the larger states. So if we're just voting, this is how the argument goes, right? If we're just going by popular vote, then candidates might just visit Florida, New York, California, Texas, and so forth, the states with the biggest number of voters. But our system, they argue, gives states like New Hampshire, Minnesota, Iowa, states that are swing states, states that are close, an important role, and their ideas and concerns have to be considered, right? So that's one of the main arguments in favor of keeping the Electoral College. Another argument in favor of keeping it is that it would offer a better outcome in the event a candidate dies shortly after a general election. The electors would then have the ability to select the person's vice presidential candidate or someone else to serve as president. And the same holds true if the vice presidential candidate died after the election. So there would be no need for another national election. The electors could decide. So there are numerous arguments against the Electoral College. In fact, if you go on the internet, it's hard to find much material in defense of it. The internet is awash in anti-Electoral College messages. Couldn't be much more blunt than this one. The Electoral College, much maligned. Here's another one I really like. I would buy this t-shirt for someone. Drink until the Electoral College makes sense. I like that. And you can see that this cartoonist has depicted the rather circuitous route to the White House that the Electoral College creates. So the main one is really depicted by this postcard. There you see a man dressed in sort of, it looks like ancient Greece. It looks like he's in ancient Greece in the fabled democracy of Athens. And the point is that, as he states in the postcard here, sorry, the Electoral College has made your vote completely irrelevant. We don't have, excuse me, I have something on my screen here. We don't have a democratic vote. It is mediated by an antiquated institution. I discussed earlier how Clinton won the popular vote in 2016, but lost the presidency because of the Electoral College. Before that, the most recent case was in 2000. I'm sure most of you remember that, when Al Gore received more votes than George Bush, but Bush won the Electoral College. But here's the time of my presentation when I start to bite my nails a bit to see whether the technology actually works here. So I have a YouTube video clip, and it looks like it is going to work. So what this clip is going to show you is the moment when Al Gore, even though he received more of the popular vote than George Bush, has to announce in the Senate that in fact George Bush has won the presidency. And you'll hear the hesitation in his voice, and quite an awkward moment there.
Frank, do you have the volume on your computer on? You have the speaker on your computer on? Because that's the audio is not coming through.
You want me to raise the volume on my computer?
Of the speaker, yeah, because it's not coming through.
Okay, I have to minimize, I guess, stop sharing the video.
If you exit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't. Hopefully that'll do it. Let's see. All right, let's see. Can you hear it now?
No.
Should I just skip it?
You can also check.
I think you're gonna have to adjust it on YouTube itself. There's an X on the volume if you hover over it.
Here?
Yeah, try pressing that. No.
I think it's on maximum. Would you just like me to move beyond it?
I think so, yeah.
All right, everyone. I'm sorry. I guess you couldn't hear the video. So, but anyway, there's a moment there where Al Gore, hesitates when he's reading out the votes, and so awkward, but really quite magnanimous. Hopefully, we have the same sort of transition in this coming election. I know there's lots of concerns about that. So anyway, this is about the halfway point of my talk. And so just some questions to ponder here. How many of you would like to eliminate the Electoral College and why? How many of you would like to keep it and why? And I guess the question I'm most asked, I ask you to think about it for a minute, is why do you think the Electoral College has never been eliminated? So that's probably the number one question I get asked by folks. And my number one answer to that is that it is difficult and arduous to amend the Constitution. In order to pass a constitutional amendment, the US Congress needs to pass a proposed amendment by a 2/3 vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. I don't know if you've been noticing what's going on lately. They can't even decide on a lunch menu. But that's only the beginning of the process. Then the amendments are sent to the state legislatures, and 3/4 of the states must approve the amendment. In our modern world, that means 38 of the 50 states, 50 state legislatures would have to approve the amendment. There have been three proposals to change the system with varying degrees of success, and one is still pending. The closest we came to getting rid of the Electoral College was in the aftermath of the 1968 election between Richard Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and George Wallace. Some of you may remember that election. Well, Wallace won several states that typically voted Democratic, but Nixon won a large percentage of the Electoral College. So, and he won the Electoral College by a large number, even though he barely received more than 1% more of the popular vote than Humphrey. So this created concern in the Congress. They wanted to avoid, in fact, what we've seen in 2 of the last 5 elections, where someone wins by the Electoral College and not the popular vote. So Birch Bayh of Indiana and House of Representatives member Emanuel Seller, they draft what's called the Bayh-Seller Amendment. Emanuel Seller was from New York, and he proposed the elimination of the Electoral College. Instead, his amendment would stipulate that a ticket would need to garner at least 40% of the vote to be elected. If no ticket received 40%, there would be a runoff vote. The amendment passed the House, but was filibustered in the Senate and never passed there. At the time, the New York Times estimated that 30 state legislatures were likely to adopt the amendment if it had been passed by Congress. That still would have left it 8 states short of approval. All right, so that's probably the closest we've ever come to getting rid of the Electoral College, because the Electoral College is in the Constitution and it must be amended to get rid of it. The second effort to get rid of the Electoral College didn't really go very far. It was called the Every Vote Counts Amendment, and it was introduced in the House of Representatives in 2005 and again in 2009, but never really received serious consideration. So as far as I know, I don't believe similar legislation has been introduced in this Congress. And then so finally, there is still one measure pending. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Quite a mouthful there. National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. The states that agree to join this compact pledge to give their electors to the candidate that wins the national popular vote. Now, New Jersey has voted to join that compact, but it doesn't go into effect until states totaling 270 electoral votes have joined it. So thus far, states totaling around 165 electoral votes have joined the compact. It's not active, so don't worry about it right now. But if it were active, can you imagine the outcry in New Jersey if the state voted for Biden, but the national vote was for Trump? In that case, New Jersey would have to give its electoral votes to Trump. All right, so this kind of arrangement is possible, because the Constitution gives states the right to select their electors and determine the conditions under which they cast their ballots. So, as I say, for the purposes of this election, the Electoral College system remains in place. That compact is really an effort by states to circumvent the Electoral College. So I thought I'd take a few minutes now to tell you about the current system, the selection process for electors, and the ritual that is the Electoral College. In most states, if not all, the political parties select their electors. So in New Jersey, the electors for Joe Biden will be picked by the state Democratic Party. And likewise, the state Republican Party will select the electors for Donald Trump. So there I am on the photo to your left. I'm the handsome guy signing with the gray hair, and the other one I'm on the left photo. So I was not elected by the Democratic Party at a state party convention to be an elector. I was contacted by the staff of the chairman of the party. At that time, it was John Wisniewski, who was an assemblyman. It is seen very much as an honorary post, and the party selects loyalists or representatives that make up the party coalition in one way or another. So at the time I was selected, I was president of the Latino Action Network, a civil rights organization. And as I'm sure you know, Latinos are an important constituent group within the Democratic Party. Now, one of the questions my son asked me as we were driving to Trenton that day, he was 13 at the time, he said to me, "Dad, do you have to vote for Obama? Can you vote for someone else?" So as I noted earlier, the Supreme Court has decided that for the most part, although in New Jersey they have not enacted an official law that governs the situation, it's not clear whether an elector in New Jersey might be able to change their vote. Certainly the Supreme Court was clear that the states have the right to demand that their electors vote for the slate that they're elected for. And certainly at the time I was elector, there was no prohibition. So I suppose I could have voted for Mitt Romney. So anyway, these photos are of the signing ceremony. When you get there, all the documents have been filled out. And there is an official ballot that you get when you arrive there as well. You get to keep them as well. So historically, why hasn't it happened more frequently? Why haven't electors chosen other candidates? If they do, and when they've done that, they've been labeled, in air quotes here, faithless electors. So several reasons, in my opinion. The parties screen the folks they select to the Electoral College. In my case, I'm not a party loyalist, but I had a strong philosophical disagreement with Romney and a great deal of respect for President Obama. So there was no way I was going to disregard my personal beliefs and switch my vote. The party would have known this from the public positions I took on various issues. However, even if you did want to change your vote, let me give you a little bit of the scene in Trenton when you arrive. The State House is decorated in a festive holiday mood. There are menorahs and Christmas trees all over the place. Everybody's in a happy, jovial mood. And you, that is the elector, have been selected for a ceremonial ritual dating back more than 200 years. And you feel the importance of that historical moment. Now, if you were to declare for another candidate, you would need to do it in the middle of that signing ceremony. And everyone would have to wait for you, and new documents would have to be drawn up. And of course, you would be surrounded by angry electors. So talk about peer pressure. Now, I imagine right now, given the Supreme Court ruling, what I would imagine is that each state or New Jersey could have an alternate elector. So Freyre, you're not voting for who you said you're going to vote for, exit. And then they would bring in the other elector, the alternate elector. I would imagine some procedure like that could easily be adopted. Now, after the signing of the documents, you then go into the state Senate chamber for the ceremony, and you get officially assigned a seat, and there I am in the photo on your left, waiting for the official ceremony to begin. And in our case, the ceremony was officiated by the chairman of the Democratic Party, and on the photo to the right, the person on the left is Assemblyman John Wisniewski. The person on the right called the event to order, the ceremony to order. She was the lieutenant governor at the time, Kim Guadagno. Governor Chris Christie was not in attendance. And then the Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court also has an official role in this ceremony. Copies of your certificate of vote are sent to the Congress and then kept on file at the Library of Congress. So in a small way, you become an official part of the record of U.S. history. And one final nice touch is that you get an official invitation to the presidential inauguration. It was freezing, but it was historic. Now, as I noted earlier, at the time I served, it was thought you could change your vote. And I did receive 2 petitions asking me to change my vote. I've made those petitions available to the officials at your library to share with you. I don't know if you received them in your email, but in any case, I've made it available to them. You can also email me at Kean University if you're interested in getting them. But anyway, I received a letter at my home from a Rebecca Hamilton. How ironic is that, huh? From Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She asked me to vote for Romney. She believed there was substantial voter fraud and an honest election was not held. She wanted a recount, but since that was not forthcoming, she asked me to take a leap of faith and presume that without the voter fraud, Romney would have won the election. I reviewed the data. It wasn't difficult to find. President Obama received just shy of 66 million votes, and Romney a little less than 61 million. So in terms of percentages, Obama received 51% and Romney 47%. So I found her claim unconvincing. I admire, though, Ms. Hamilton, because it appears as if she undertook the Herculean task of contacting at her own expense all of the electors across the nation, all right, seeking to exercise her rights as a citizen. And as far as I can tell, she was not part of an organized movement. So I found her, excuse me, her diligence very impressive. Not so much with the second petition that I received. It was from a group called Waking Up America. It was based in Sun City, Arizona. And this group was affiliated with the sheriff of Maricopa County at the time, Joe Arpaio. Since then, he'd been indicted and convicted, and I think he was pardoned by Trump a year or so ago. Anyway, this group asserted in their letter that there was something suspicious about President Obama's birth certificate and several other of his personal documents. They were clearly tied into the birther movement that maintains that Obama was not born in Hawaii, as he maintains, but somewhere else, like Kenya. So, drum roll, please. On the left is President Obama's birth certificate that he produced at some point in his first term. So I've never been moved by the arguments of the birther movement, and I was not moved by the information that they sent me. So I thought I might conclude my remarks by sharing my opinion of the Electoral College with you. I oppose it. I'm reminded of the famous Groucho Marx line, I don't want to belong to a club that would have me as a member. But seriously, I agreed to take part in it because as a historian, I wanted to experience the process. I also felt a sense of civic duty, regardless of my personal feelings about the Electoral College. Somebody was going to serve on it. And let me just say, I do not expect the United States to do away with the institution anytime soon. My conclusion is that it is a historical curiosity that never seems important enough to make it a national priority. After the election, we move on to the process of governing and forget about this very curious institution, which is uniquely our own. So, if there are any questions, I would be happy to entertain them. My friend helped me develop that PowerPoint, so please excuse the self-imposed applause. Anyway, this would probably be a good time to take your questions. So perhaps I can stop sharing, right, Dan? And Dan, the moderator, will tell me about the questions. I do see a question by Deborah Davis. So Deborah, can you have Deborah unmute herself, Dan?
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Hi, Deborah.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for inviting me. I have a question about an alternative to the Electoral College. Maybe perhaps I missed it because I'm multitasking, but I was interested in the alternative of a proportional vote, a proportion of the popular vote if it could overcome the Electoral College, if there is a way to maybe reform the Electoral College so that it would be subservient to the popular vote.
Well, as I say, you could go about the amendment process, which I've explained was pretty arduous. I don't know if you were here for that part of it.
I did hear that part.
Yeah. Then this interstate compact, that's an effort to do exactly what you're saying, to go around the Electoral College by having enough states, totaling 270 electoral votes, agree to give their electoral votes to whoever is the high vote getter, regardless of who actually wins their state. All right, so you can see how that would be a method of bringing the popular vote to the forefront. It would circumvent the Electoral College. Am I explaining that clearly? I hope so. It's not the easiest concept to grasp. Do you follow what I mean?
I do.
Great, great. Did you have a follow-up or anyone else have questions? Thank you for your question.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I know Dan is moderating. So Dan, I'll take the questions or unmute the folks that you have identified wish to ask a question.
Sure. You can either type your question into the chat box on the bottom or just unmute yourself. And we'll just go one at a time. So Elaine?
Yeah, so I have a follow-up to the last discussion, and I think the question I have is there any benefit to each state allocating delegates on a proportional basis? In other words, instead of having winner takes all, could a state say, I'll give, 70% of my delegates to Biden and 30% to Trump, because that's how it broke in my state?
That's a great question, Elaine. Thank you for it. And thanks for coming tonight. So 2 states actually experiment with this concept some. And to answer your question, yes, Elaine, a state could do it as you suggest. The states have tremendous flexibility. 48 of the 50 states give all their electoral college votes to the high vote getter in those states. So yes, they could do it though, that let's say Trump receives 40% in New Jersey and Biden receives 60, you could apportion it so it was broken down. The electoral college votes in New Jersey could be distributed that way. All right, so it could be done that way. 2 states play with a variant of that, Maine and Nebraska. So, for example, in the last election, Maine, if it gave all its electoral votes to the high vote getter, would have given them all to Hillary Clinton. But what they do is, Maine has 4 electoral votes. So the winner of in Maine, the one who gets the most votes gets the 2 electoral votes that are typically allocated for the Senate seats in a state. And then there are 2 congressional districts in Maine, one around Portland, which is strongly Democratic, and then there's the one in northern Maine, which leans Republican, but is purplish, if you will. It can go either way, but sometimes votes Republican in presidential elections. So that's what happens, right? So Clinton won the popular vote in Maine. She got 2 there. Then she won the district around Portland, so she got 1 there. But Trump won the rural vote in Maine, and he got 1 there. So Maine gave 3 electoral votes to Clinton and 1 to Trump. In Nebraska, they have a similar situation. They have 5 electoral votes, and there is a district, I don't remember how it turned out in 2016, but the district around Omaha, even though that is a very solidly Republican state, the congressional district around Omaha leans Democratic. So you could see in this election, Trump getting 4 electoral votes out of Nebraska and Biden getting that district in Omaha and getting 1. So Elaine, to just sort of circle back to your question, the states have tremendous variety and a tremendous capacity to decide how they do it. And New Jersey does it, a winner gets all, but it doesn't have to do it that way. Other questions? I'm here all night, folks.
Is the potential for this compact amount amongst the states to be challenged as being in violation of the Constitution?
I'm sure that the moment it would go into effect, it would be challenged. It would be challenged. So, yeah, so you would have to figure out now, the states, as I say, have great variety in how they decide to allocate their electoral votes. So it'd be interesting to see what the Supreme Court would rule on that. It would go to the Supreme Court, no doubt. And yeah, so you're quite right. And I am not prepared to render a judicial opinion on the outcome of that case at this time, but I would imagine that that's where it would go and that's where it would be decided. Thank you for your question. Do you have a follow-up?
I do.
Elaine.
Yes, okay. So if states, if the 50 states went to this proportionate allocation rather than winner take all, two questions. One, does it resolve the issue of, does it make votes equal in terms of weight in that context? I think it would make it more democratic. But two, I'm interested in your view as to whether it would make you feel more comfortable with keeping the Electoral College if the allocation were that way.
No, because I think the Electoral College should go. But
Okay.
to your point, though, that's a really insightful question, Elaine. Are you a lawyer? Is that
Yeah.
the type of, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the type of question you could just see being debated in the courts. Well, so obviously what you could have is in your congression, I live in New Jersey too, and I guess you do too, right? In your district, it could go heavily Republican. And in my district, it might be just a narrow win for the Democrats. So in my district, it would go to Biden. In your district, just in this hypothetical example, it would go to Trump. But you could still end up having more votes for the candidate who gets the most electoral votes in a state, based on whether the votes in the different congressional districts are lopsided in some and very close in another. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, I think it should be, my personal view on this is it should be a straight up popular vote. All right, now I can see the argument from the small states, right? Why would the presidential candidate go to New Hampshire if there's a pure popular vote, right? Because New Hampshire actually is a key state. You know, its electoral votes could make the difference, you know, in reaching that jigsaw puzzle magic number of 270. So that's a great question, though, you raised. So no, I don't know. Would it make you feel all right if we're done that way?
It would make me, I haven't actually like worked it all through in my mind, but the only reason I can see keeping the Electoral College is to avoid the horrific outcome where we needed to have a recount nationally, right? So a national popular vote so close that could actually allow a contender to call for a national recount, to me would be a horror show. So, okay, now I'm trying to find some resolution to the fact that right now, especially with demographic trends the way they are, with this, it seems to me, disenfranchising the larger states. I mean, I understand New Hampshire, but I also understand New York, California, and New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Flip is now true. So
Our votes are less valuable. Yeah.
Our votes are less valuable. And when you put it all together with the gerrymandering and, you know, people, individuals, as opposed to party power, people, citizens, I think, are losing their clout. So I would like to see some resolution that kept the Electoral College to avoid the risk of a national popular vote recount, but with a different allocation. And I haven't figured it out myself, but that's why I'm asking for these.
Yeah. That's well argued, well thought out on your part. Yeah, they're right. There has to be further debate on it, but I don't see it changing actually.
No.
So if you're actually someone who thinks the Electoral College is good, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't see it changing. It's so difficult, and you know the nation is polarized, so it's hard to envision getting you know, a heavy majority, a supermajority in Congress to vote for an amendment, and certainly getting 38 of 50 states. So yeah, so if you like the Electoral College, rest easy.
I have a couple questions coming in through the chat. First one from Beverly. Can state legislatures overturn electors and choose Trump loyal electors?
No, the state legislature passes the law that governs how electors are selected. But then once it governs, you know, it's passed that law, then the law takes over. And so, like I say, in New Jersey, the person who wins the majority of votes gets all the electors. So after that is tabulated, the electors for, let's say, Biden, he's likely to win here in New Jersey, they'll be selected. They'll be going to the State House to vote on December 14th. So there's no way for the state legislature to change that at that time.
Oh. Next question is, are individual states allowed to change their state constitutions to allocate electoral votes proportionately?
Yes, they are able to do that. And they may not have to change their state constitutions to do it. A law would happen. And let me rephrase the last answer to my last question. I suppose in some crazy world, if Biden won and the state legislature decided to change the law, I mean, you'd have a tremendous constitutional crisis here in New Jersey, and the New Jersey Supreme Court would have to decide on whether or not that was legal. But that is hard to imagine, that kind of situation, where Biden wins the vast majority of votes, and then, or a clear majority of votes, and then the state legislature votes to say that, this other side should get the electoral votes. It's inconceivable to me how that would happen. Not to mention that both houses of the state legislature are controlled by Democrats. But I couldn't see it the other way either. If Trump won the popular vote here, I couldn't see the state legislature making some law in the last minute to give the electors to the other side.
Okay. Next question from Pauline. The Electoral College is undemocratic, but so is the Senate. Should its legitimacy be questioned?
So, yeah, those are really profound questions. As you know, it sounds like you know this, Pauline, when the Union was being created, when the Constitution was being drafted, there was a concern by smaller states, i.e. the southern states, that they would lose power, and that they particularly wanted to protect slavery. And so having the two senators there, because as I've already made pretty clear, right? A state like Maine has two senators, but California, the most populous nation, only has two senators too. So that's another one of the devices inserted into the Constitution to create equity among the states, so that it isn't a pure popular vote situation. Because I suppose if you allocate, because the House, that's allocated based on population numbers, and that's determined by the census. And by the way, fill out your census form, because New Jersey could lose a House seat in this upcoming census. And California is in danger of losing too. Or at least that's what demographers that I've read tell me. So, anyway, yeah, so the Senate is not it's not determined by popular vote. It was determined that every state, whether it has small population or an enormous population, whether it's large geographically or small geographically, has two senators. The House is supposed to be, if you will, the people's body. It is supposed to be representative of where the people are living, not the Senate.
Next question is from Kristen. How do you think the argument would change if the process became more modern, the process being the process of voting?
Yeah, well, for me, I know there are folks already that have raised some concerns about changing it, but for me, it should be one person, one vote. I mean, otherwise, what's going on here? I mean, and it's scary to me that 2 of the last 5 elections have been determined by the Electoral College. This is a frightening prospect because, and in the last election, truth be told, and I'm not trying to be partisan here, but Hillary Clinton received 3 million more votes than Trump. So what kind of democracy do we have here? I'm really worried about it. And it could easily happen this time again. I'm looking at, you should all go to that website I was telling you, 270 to win, 270 to win, and map out what you think might be the result. But I could easily see Trump not getting the popular vote. In fact, I don't think his own strategists think he can win the popular vote. right? So they're looking for an electoral college victory. That's exactly, as far as everything I have read, that's what they're trying to do, win in the electoral college. And so they've targeted key states looking for the right combination of state electoral college votes to equal victory. But, you know, you can call me up or email me if I'm wrong about this, but Biden is going to win the popular vote. So the question is, will Trump win the electoral vote? This is my assessment of it. Again, not being partisan so much as looking at what I'm seeing in the voter numbers. It's pretty clear that Trump's reelection hopes stand on the Electoral College. Anyway, so that's what I think would happen. Good question. Thank you for asking it.
Next question is from Ken. Isn't the balance that people within a state can change their rules, but state versus state equality remains?
So I'm not sure I completely understand that question. You know, every state can change its rules. But yes, could you ask Ken to elaborate on it further? Or maybe unmute him.
Yeah, Ken, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hello, Ken.
Hello.
Hi, Ken. How are you? Thanks for
Not bad,
showing
Frank.
up
How are
tonight.
you?
Good, Ken. Thank you for attending.
My question was that trying to balance the concept of states' rights versus individual rights, and wouldn't the balance potentially be viewed as within your own state, your vote matters because you can determine that it matters down to the singular vote if you so chose, while balancing our needs to have states be equal?
Yeah, that's right, Ken. I mean, that's actually similar to what Elaine was arguing too. So you and Elaine could form possibly a group on this. That's right. I mean, there's a balance here, right? In terms of our federal structure, right? This is why states agreed to join together, because if you look back at the founding of the nation, that's a great question, Ken. If you look at the founding of the nation, these states don't all have the same interests. As a matter of fact, even today, many states don't have the same interests as other states, but they are all granted a certain amount of autonomy locally to decide other, you know, some of the other laws, car laws and certain criminal laws and so forth. So that's their autonomy that they get as a state. And yet within the federal system, the Senate, if you will, and the Electoral College is a check on states being dictated to by the national government, in a sense, right? So New York, California, I always hear it from some of my blogging friends who I debate. They say, you know, I don't want to be ruled by the coasts. You know, I don't want to be ruled by the liberals on each of the coasts, on the East Coast, and then they call out California the left coast, right? So what happens to these folks in the middle? I don't want to be ruled by the coast. The heartland, they argue. We need to have our independence and say too. So that's right. I mean, that's the infernal debate in the United States, right? How to preserve states' rights and, in essence, minority rights, not in the traditional sense of, you know, communities that have been oppressed historically, but minority rights in the sense of smaller states with concerns that may not resonate in New Jersey or California or New York, but they resonate in Nebraska or Kansas or wherever. Anyway, thanks, Ken. I don't know if you have a follow-up. If not, I'll take the next question.
Last question we have here is, what if the vote count was not completed by the time of the Electoral College vote in December?
Oh boy, that would be chaos. That would be chaos. That's where the courts would have to intercede. And so you can see where that is the last thing we need right now. I'm hoping that either way, that it's a fairly decisive election, and that we know within a few days of election night. I think with the voter mail-in ballots, it might be a day or two, but we should know I'd love to know election night, frankly, even if it's 3 a.m. I'd like to know election night, but it's possible that counting some of the mail-in ballots might take a day or two. But what'll happen there is that that it'll have to be decided by the courts, and they don't want to get to the point where it's not decided by the time the Electoral College votes. Otherwise, and the Supreme Court would intervene in this. I'm very certain of that. But if they didn't, then the Electoral College, although that's the problem, actually, now that I'm thinking your question through, because there's ramifications. If you don't know the votes in a certain state, you can't seat the electors, right? So that goes back to, let's take the 2000 election. If you remember that mess with Gore and Bush, right? I think Bush won Florida by less than 1,000 votes, right? And the Supreme Court effectively halted the recount, right? So once they halted the recount and Bush had however many votes he had over Gore, then those electors, I think there were 27 at the time, they were seated, the Republican electors, Bush's electors were seated. Crisis averted. Whether you like the decision or not, no crisis. So that's the problem. Yeah, your question had different layers, and I almost had to think it through as I was talking here. The electors can't be seated until you know who's won in each state. So in New Jersey, if by December 14th we don't know who's won the vote here, then the electors can't be seated. So the courts, either the state court or, in the case of the 2000 election, the US Supreme Court would have to decide which electors get seated. Did that answer your question? I hope so, because I had to think it through and I went about it in a circuitous route, but I think I've answered your question.
Excuse me, a follow-up to Ken's question: how would removing the Electoral College respond to maintaining that balance?
Well, as I say, I opt for having a more democratic process. So I'm less concerned about the smaller states and protecting that piece of the federal system. I'm more concerned with having a democracy. So I would weigh that. And that's what the justices that's what everybody has to do. As Elaine was mentioning before, and Ken, that's how you weigh it. So in my weighing of those two considerations, both of them important, I opt for the popular vote or making the society more democratic. That's how I would rule on that. So if you're thinking of appointing me to the Supreme Court, now you know where I stand on that. But it would be a weighing process. You would have to weigh that. And some of the pieces of it, I think the Senate is not something that ought to be altered. That gives smaller states a measure of protection. So hopefully I've answered your question from my perspective.
Would the state legislator have the right to extend the date for the Electoral College if we needed more time?
No. That's mandated in the Constitution. So no, the state could not do that.
Okay, that was the last question in the chat box. Does anyone have any last questions for Frank?
I'm here all night, folks. Elaine doesn't have another question for me?
No, I don't. I was just wondering what's your gamble on how long it will take to find out when the votes will be counted?
I'm sorry, Elaine, did I interrupt you?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I write a little blog, and so I get I usually kid around with my 5 fans about this. I think it's right now, we'll see. I think a lot rests, my opinion, on tomorrow's debate. I think if Biden can do a reasonably good job of presenting his ideas, then I think, and then I think there's another debate. I don't remember how many presidential debates. Are there two?
Great.
Three. Yeah, so that's a lot. That's pretty grueling. I'm sure there are going to be gaffes on both sides in those debates. Neither one of them I find particularly eloquent. So that's going to be I'm going to be tuned to that debate very carefully. But I think if Biden can hold his own in these debates and he comes across in a logical fashion, then I think we'll have a decision pretty early. Within a day. I think we'll know, we may not know when we go to sleep that night, but by middle of the next day, I think we could know the election. And that would be my thinking of it. I don't think it's going to drag on. Now that we know that President Trump has raised these big concerns about the mail-in ballots, I imagine every state is going to be hardwired to count them as quickly as possible. So nobody wants to be in that situation. Forget about the national election for a minute. You don't want to be a state official and you can't tell your people in your state who won the election. It's just terrible for the state. It doesn't matter what party you're with. You're going to want to give them a result. Otherwise, you look like an idiot, a clod, not being able to figure out who won the election, and it's state officials responsible for that, not federal officials. So I believe that within a day or two we'll know the results. That's my thinking, Elaine. Somebody asked how you would contact me. I just saw the question pop up. You can contact me at Kean University. If you Google my name, and it's right there under, if you look at my little head there, in my little box. Oh no, I guess I have a big head here because I'm the main speaker right now. Okay, so if you look under my big noggin, you'll see my name there. And so Google it, write it down because it's not an easy one to necessarily remember. And then you'll get my email. And feel free to send me an email. And if I'm wrong about what I've said to you, then you can, let me know how wrong I am. Or you can say, boy, you were right on the money there, Freyre, you got it.
And you have a public blog?
No, I just do it with my Facebook friends. I shouldn't actually call it a blog. But I offer my prognostication and pearls of wisdom as I'm doing here this evening with you. So anyway, so any other questions? Happy to answer them.
Oh, and you're on Twitter too. I'll follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook friend me. That's actually, then you can, I've actually been keeping a coronavirus diary. So I'm a historian, as you all know. And these are very historic times. And if you can, even if you pick up your diary now, start keeping it in case you haven't kept one. You want to leave that to your children and grandchildren or friends and neighbor, whoever, you or your public library, donate it to Madison. Because historians like me are going to want in 100 years to figure out what you were thinking and doing. And I had my students do that in the fall semester. I'm sorry, in the spring semester. We're in the fall semester now. And it was so fascinating to see their reactions. For the youth, it was one of lost events, lost graduations, birthday parties, marriages, engagements. You felt their loss in that way. Some of them knew some folks who had died. Unfortunately, I've known several people who've died. In fact, we lost a colleague at Kean University, unfortunately, someone in our counseling department. So that was big blow. And in our civil rights group that I mentioned to you at the beginning, we lost 2 colleagues. So, but a lot of my students, they hadn't known folks who had passed, but they had lost contact with their friends, been isolated from people, were suffering from depression, those sorts of things. Anyway, these are things that I think will be important to know for future generations. So anyway, send me a friend request and then you can read I call it the Coronavirus Diary, Meanderings of a Historian Looking for Meaning, something like this. So anyway.
Good.
Okay, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. So I want to thank Frank for giving us this interesting and very timely talk. And stay tuned for more lectures coming from Madison Public Library. You should all be subscribed to the newsletter, but if you're not, you can find them all on our website.
And I want to thank everybody too. Thank you, Dan, for moderating. I want to thank everybody for coming. In these difficult times, it gives me some comfort to see faces and to engage in ideas and thoughts. It gives me comfort here from my bunker in Freehold to see people still active and thinking. So thank you, everybody. You've been a great audience.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
He said he's paid tens of millions in taxes in recent.
So, all right, then I'll say good night then, Dan. Thank you.